Welcome to Scrubbed In, the DVM Journey, the podcast where we dive into the wild, rewarding, and sometimes unpredictable world of becoming a doctor of veterinary medicine. I'm your host, Grace Gaynor, a current third-year veterinary student at the Virginia Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine. Whether you're an aspiring vet, a vet student, or just passionate about animals, this is your backstage pass into becoming a DVM. From classroom to clinic, we're sharing the insights, tips, and real-life experiences to help you thrive on your journey to becoming a vet. So scrub in, and let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Scrubbed In. I'm your host, Grace Gaynor, and today I'm excited to introduce you all to Dr. Robyn Hahn. Dr. Hahn graduated from North Carolina State College of Veterinary Medicine in 1999 after completing her bachelor's at Virginia Tech, go Hokies, and a master's in immunology at UNC at Chapel Hill. She has practiced different types of medicine since graduating, including GP, specialty/ER, equine mobile practice, and community practice. She joined Veterinary Emergency Group, or known as VEG ER for pets, in August of 2022, and recently opened her own VEG hospital in Chapel Hill just 1 month ago as medical director. She is also an exotics instructor for the NERD, or New ER Doctor program for new VEG doctors. Dr. Hahn, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Grace. It's happy to be here.
I'm so excited to hear about your journey, so let's start from the beginning. Can you tell us about your journey to veterinary medicine?
Not atypical for many young girls. I always said I wanted to be a veterinarian when I grew up. And I came to Virginia Tech as a pre-vet major and quickly realized that there were things about vet med that maybe I hadn't banked on. I remember distinctly having to take a class on pigs and was, immediately turned off. Like, this, I don't want anything to do with pigs.
Yeah.
Like, why do I have to do pigs? Just young and naive. And I actually changed my major to microbiology. I did an honors thesis, and that's how I ended up getting my master's degree. I wound up going to graduate school first, but I couldn't get the whole being a veterinarian out from under my skin. And so when I was about halfway through my graduate work, I looked into it again and spent a little more time, researching different ways that people can be a veterinarian, and ultimately went back to school.
Wow. When you first graduated, did you have a clear idea of what kind of medicine you wanted to practice, or did that evolve over time?
100% I was equine from the very beginning. So I've always been a horse girl. I started riding horses when I was 7. My mom sent me to Girl Scout camp where they had horses, and I was hooked. And so I knew I wanted to do that. And back then, they didn't have any sort of tracking type of curriculum at NC State. So everyone took core courses that included small animal and large animal. So even those who knew they would never touch a farm animal or a horse had to do, a minimum amount of stuff like in the barns. And for me, the opposite. I had to do a minimum amount of things in the small animal hospital. In hindsight, obviously, that was really good that I didn't track. And so I'm a huge proponent still for curricula to have a good, well-rounded education, because you just never know where vet med is going to take you. But I 1,000% was bought in to doing all equine practice upon graduation.
Can you walk us through how you started with equine, if you started with equine, and then you moved to GP, did community practice? Can you tell us about that work? What kind of pushed you into those different sectors at that time in your life?
Yeah, so life is funny. I did equine practice and loved it. Absolutely loved the work, but I really didn't like the hours.
Yeah.
In hindsight, it was more the actual practice that I landed with first, I think, than practicing equine medicine itself. So I was on call a lot. I was the youngest there was an owner, another associate, and myself. So I was carrying a pager 4 nights a week. I was working easily 60 hours a week, and I had a major injury roughly once a year. I met and got married to my husband. We had talked about family, and none of it seemed to like be able to fit. I'm like, you know, I love the work, but I also, the work is kind of killing me, literally and figuratively. I'm not sure if it's compatible with my next stage of life, etc. How I wound up in small animal medicine was honestly, and this is a good thing to point out to your listeners, is I signed a bad contract. So I was unable to work for any other equine practice within 25 miles of any farm that we practiced at, which basically took out all of Northern Virginia. Wow. And so if I wanted to stay in vet med, I literally had to do something else. I could have fought the contract and whatnot, just, you know, was not making enough money to hire lawyers, didn't want to go down that route. So I started to look at small animal. I had a friend of a friend who owned a small animal clinic, who invited me to come in and, you know, do some shadowing, etc., just to see if it's something I would like. And I actually quickly really did enjoy it, particularly because then I could like ride my own horse on my own time, and it was very set hours, and I didn't have to be on call anymore, no more emergency at that time, and it was just a really nice welcome shift.
Wow. So interesting. I think two main takeaways for people that are listening to this. Number one, obviously a lot of us come out and we think we're going to do one thing, or some people don't know at all. That's totally valid too. But there's so many opportunities in this profession to change tracks and to redirect. And so I love that your story kind of highlights that. And also, secondly, I think it's so important that we read our contracts super diligently, because unfortunately your story is not unique. That has happened to a lot of people.
Yeah, not at all.
And that's very, I want to say, life-changing. Like, obviously you had to change paths, and obviously without that you wouldn't be here today where you are. So that obviously led you down a different path, which has brought you a lot of success. But wow, can't believe 25 miles from any of the farms. That is just incredibly wild to me. So we need to be diligent when we're reading our contracts to make sure that we don't get into a situation like that.
Yeah, every contract I have ever had since, I've had reviewed by a lawyer, because none of us are lawyers and you just don't know. So that is definitely a piece of advice. And I know when you just graduate, you're like, I don't have $500 or whatever for a lawyer to look at this contract, but it could save you your career. So I absolutely recommend it now.
What kind of lawyer does it matter what kind of lawyer reviews it?
There are lawyers out there who literally just do veterinary contracts.
Wow.
So You could probably Google it, because I do think they have to be like licensed in the state that you are working in. But yeah, it's actually a thing that exists. And the woman that I had used was a former equine veterinarian who then went back to law school.
Wow.
and did law work, mostly contracts.
Okay, cool. That's cool to know that there are people like that out there. I had absolutely no idea. It's really inspiring to hear how your career has evolved and how you've worn just so many different hats in this profession. And you're now a medical director at VEG Chapel Hill. What was that transition like, going from clinician to leadership, and how did that opportunity arise for you?
Yeah, so I absolutely have enjoyed ER medicine and I didn't think I would be just an ER doctor on the floor forever, but also wasn't sure what the next step would look like. I worked at the VEG in Charlotte. I was what was considered a long-haul commuter, so I did not move from my farm in Durham. I would go for a block of shifts, I would stay in a hotel, I would come home. And I was one of the more senior doctors there. When our current medical director went out on maternity leave, she had asked me if I had ever thought about leadership, which I had. I just didn't know how and when it would happen. So at that point, they made me, it's got a different name now, it's called lead doctor, but back then at VEG, it was called an MDA, a medical director assistant. And so what that entailed was I did half of my shifts on the floor as an ER doctor, and I did the other half doing the administrative tasks, the mentoring tasks, and just like learning from her, like what she did day to day. And then when she went out on leave, I took over. She extended her leave multiple times, and so I wound up being medical director there for about 5 months, so quite a long time, and then found that I really liked it. And I feel like the doctors that had formerly been like my peers, who I was now helping, they gave me good feedback too, so it felt like it was the right next step. Pretty immediately, they had an opening for an interim medical director in Asheville. That was super tough because now it was a 4-hour commute from my house, but I kind of did the same thing. Like I would go out for a week and come back, and I did that for roughly 9 months until we found a good replacement for someone to be long-term. And also we knew at that point Chapel Hill was in the works, it was being built, so it was right around the corner. And then I basically did kind of work from home stuff, training, interviewing, getting prepped for the new hospital in the small time between leaving Asheville and Chapel Hill opening.
Wow. I think it is so courageous of you to be driving to a very far destination, doing shifts, and then coming back. There are people who do it. I know a couple other doctors that do, but that must be a lot of work. What does your work look like now that you have a closer hospital? Do you do any shifts on the floor? Are you all leadership? What does it look like today?
Generally, the medical director position at VEG is not on the floor. The average medical director may take 1 or 2 shifts a month if there are openings or call-outs, but it's really difficult to be a true medical director in the sense that we are and also be on the floor. I know there are other ERs where the medical director does partial shifts or full shifts on the floor. I do have admin duties, so I make the schedule. I make sure that our controlled drugs are ordered and that there's no discrepancies and the more menial tasks that I don't think anybody lives for. And then there's always a fair share of meetings that have to do with my growth of the hospital, discussing things that come up, etc. But then I would say the bulk of it, at least 50%, if not more, of the job is mentoring, and that is really my jam. So teaching and mentoring. So we meet, we have one-on-ones with our doctors. We find out what their interests are as far as improving skills or improving learning. We also take regular pulse checks of like where their skill sets are, and then we tailor a program individualized to each doctor to help them get those growth plans, bring them to fruition, and really learn those things. So VEG is very, very proactive about continuing education and training. And so my job, honestly, is to just facilitate making each of those doctors the best ER doctor they can be. And that really is what drives me and fills my cup.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I appreciate how you mentioned that this is something that fills your cup. I think that we all, as veterinarians, need to find that thing that fills our cup, whether that is practicing, straight medicine or maybe doing some community work on the side, high volume spay neuter, or doing mentorship programs like you obviously facilitate. So I think that's really, really interesting. And I'm going to come back to the mentorship part of your role, but I want to ask you again about your medical director role. What leadership lessons have you learned since stepping into the MD role?
Yeah, so having done it for about 2 years now, and it's definitely different now, living 30 minutes away from my hospital and being able to be there and be in contact with everyone every day. It's so much nicer. The role was obviously very different when it was interim and I didn't live in town. So I could not be as available to the doctors, and that's unfortunate. But I would say leadership is tough, right? So it involves directness, giving feedback, knowing when to push and when to just support. And I don't know that, despite the many, many leadership books that I've read, that that's something that A, either comes naturally to people, or B, you can read in a book. I think you learn a lot of that from doing, making mistakes, and doing it differently the next time. So I come from a long line of strong German women who are direct to a fault. I also grew up in the Northeast, right, where people kind of just lay it out there, and I've lived in the South for a very long time. That's not how the bulk of people talk down here, and so I quickly had to learn how to be softer in my feedback. It's also important to make sure your team understands from the very beginning that feedback is a gift. All feedback, negative, positive, neutral, anything that you can learn from an interaction and become more self-aware is helpful. Sometimes it's hard to hear in the moment, but if you can deliver it in a positive and supportive way, the intent, of course, is to help build people up, let them see their weaknesses and work on those while also building up their strengths.
Great advice. I find that being from the Northeast, I also am quite direct, and I have definitely tried to work on becoming softer. And for me, I know that I personally love direct feedback because I give direct feedback and I expect people to give me direct feedback because that's kind of what speaks to me, but I recognize that a lot of people don't receive that well. So that is definitely something that I can imagine would be a challenge living in the South and giving lots of feedback to a lot of different people. I am the president of the Veterinary Business Management Association here at school, and one thing that I'm really passionate about is kind of empowering students to consider leadership in their future, whether it's they want to be a medical director, they just want to be a leader like training other people, or just be an excellent doctor, because every single doctor out there needs to be a leader in some capacity. So for veterinary students or new grads who want to grow into leadership positions one day, what skills or mindsets should they start building now?
I think a little bit of that depends on the person, because how you view the world is going to really, again, going back to like me having to learn how to take my personality and then mold that into a way that's going to be an effective leader and mentor. I think everyone has like a unique journey in that way. But at the same time, I think the way that I got here it's a double-edged sword, but by never saying no. So every opportunity that came my way where I thought there could be a leadership component to it, I said yes. I was asked to join an ER certificate, an exotic ER certification class to learn more about exotics. I had zero exotic experience before joining VEG, but when I started in Charlotte, we had a very high exotics caseload, seemingly out of nowhere. I mean, who knew that there were a lot of exotics that needed to be seen in the Charlotte area? So when I was offered that, I said yes. That led to me forging a relationship with the lead. She's one of the vice presidents at VEG, Dr. Karen Rosenthal, and her offering me the opportunity to come to the Translational Medicine Institute at Colorado State and help teach procedures and handling on the exotic pets. Absolutely. Said yes. So not only a chance to go and do more teaching, but it's de facto a leadership role, because I am helping the new nerd classes learn something that most of them don't know anything about. And then from that, more opportunities open up. Mm-hmm. So opportunities for different pilot programs in our hospital. You need to be able to be very organized. You need to be able to lead your team into the unknown when it's like you're piloting a new piece of equipment or a new piece of software or something that is potentially going to be helpful and potentially rolled out to all VEG hospitals. So just not saying no. The downside is when you don't say no, it can really take a toll on your work-life balance. It can take a toll on your burnout and all of that kind of thing. So I do think you need to be open to possibilities, but you also need to keep a firm hold on like what's going to be too much for you, and make sure that when you need to, that you're saying no at the right time. For me, I feel like finally that I'm in my own hospital, I can start to like say no to some opportunities now, and focus on just developing my team.
I really agree that a lot of students should say yes to more things. I think that a lot of us get really focused on the schoolwork, the grades, and I sometimes struggle because I wish that more students would get involved with the clubs, for example. That's an easy way to hone your leadership skills, practice some of those things that you're talking about, like organization, time management, which you didn't say but implied with all of the things that you do. So I think if you're a student out there that's listening, please consider joining the clubs or saying yes to a different opportunity, because I think those will really help you hone those skills that are going to make you an excellent leader when you graduate. I personally, when I started vet school, had no intention of becoming the president of a club, but someone tapped me on the shoulder at the beginning, kind of pushed me into a position, and then I got pushed a little bit more, and now I'm the president. And boy, am I glad that I am, because I've done some really incredible things with the club and things that I'm really proud of, but I never would have done that if I had said no. You've talked about mentorship already, so that's a perfect segue into our next topic. I know you train a lot of new doctors through the NERD program, and you've touched on that already. Can you tell us a little bit more about the NERD program itself and your role in it?
Yeah, so the NERD program, which stands for New ER Doctor Program, is a 6-month intensive accelerated mentorship program. It's not exactly like an internship, although it does have some internship-like qualities, but essentially over 6 months we take brand new doctors who are interested in ER, particularly in the VEG way that we do ER, and it is a gradual but intense mentorship program. So starting out, first couple of weeks, literally just shadowing a senior doctor until by the last month of their 6 month, they're doing what's called paired practice, where 2 nerds are working together as one senior doctor and seeing cases completely on their own. And then in between, of course, it's gradual for them, taking some easy cases, but checking in frequently with the senior doctor they're paired with, until eventually the senior doctor is basically just sitting back and like watching and giving feedback while they're kind of running the show all by themselves. And it really is a great program because of that. The NERD program also has a weekly didactic school session. So they're doing journal clubs, they're learning about some of the latest techniques, they're going over and getting presentations on fluid therapy, exotics, lacerations, all the way down to better ways to treat diarrhea, like all of this as a didactic plan. And then hopefully they're using that in their cases that they see. And then twice during their time as nerds, they go to either the Translational Medicine Institute at Colorado State that I mentioned before, or they go to Viticus in Las Vegas, and they get essentially wet labs. So they'll get surgery, POCUS or point of care ultrasound training, they'll get critical care case training, exotics training, and endoscopy training. They get like well over 100 hours of wet lab type training to help them again be able to be up and running in their hospitals as soon as possible. And they are allowed to start being primary on surgeries from day one, depending on their skill level and comfort level. And so it's a really unique program. And then at the end of that 6 months, there are no contracts. We hope that they stay. Most of them do. I think greater than 95% of them do. And they will have a home at a VEG hospital, which they try to match up with them based on, geographical preferences, et cetera, and what's open. For me personally, my first NERD class was one that I took over when my medical director went on her mat leave. So I finished up like the last month, 6 weeks or so, with our NERD class that we had in Charlotte. And I had been working with them as doctors on the floor, of course, but became their mentor for the last few weeks. And then when I was in Asheville, I had a NERD class of 4 that I did the whole 6 months with, and one of them I hired to come to Chapel Hill, so I kept one of them. And one of them just moved back to the Asheville hospital. So I feel like that's great success to be able to keep our own nerds.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think the nerd program is so interesting and definitely something that people who are interested in ER should consider. I know that there's a lot of talk, and you can refer to previous podcasts if you're interested in learning more about the internship versus mentorship program debate. But if you are not planning to specialize and would like to stay in ER, this is a great alternative for you. What is it like working with brand new emergency veterinarians? Specifically, what are the challenges that they face most often in the first few months?
I would say the biggest challenge that most doctors face is twofold. So one is confidence, and of course they're scared to death. I remember being right out of school and being scared to death, like I don't have a backup anymore, like it's me, I'm the doctor, I have to make these decisions. So there's one, instilling confidence, because you guys are prepared. You wouldn't be allowed to graduate if you weren't prepared to handle these things. Obviously, experience is also a phenomenal teacher, and the best vets have the great training and the good experience, and you're lacking that experience in the beginning, but you're growing that experience day by day. So that's one side of it, but I think the biggest challenge, particularly in ER, is case management time-wise. It goes from when you're either a nerd, if you get overwhelmed, you just tell your primary, like, I have all that I can take on my plate, and that's great. They can take their time, they can really work up those cases, and their senior doctor is just going to take whatever, is left. But when you're finally on your own, the hardest part is that you don't have the luxury of time to think and pull out your books and remind yourself, because in the amount of time that you've done that, 6 more things have walked in the door. So figuring out how to quickly assess, how to come up with a problem list quickly and a treatment plan based on that quickly as well, so that you can get answers and then get ideas for what to do next in a timely fashion. I don't know how anyone does ER right out of school without mentorship. It seems daunting. I know people have done it, and I think when you talk to most of those people, it was not a great experience. But I think, the whole challenge of multiple cases at once is the biggest hurdle for young vets.
Yeah. And just so you know, listeners, I was on the ER floor in this Virginia, Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine teaching hospital this summer, and their interns are overnight by themselves day one. So if you're interested in doing an internship and you don't want to be in that situation, you better do some digging. You need to ask the interns if they're put overnight by themselves. If you want to get just thrown in, if that's how you learn best, go for it. But just be aware that there are a lot of institutions, not only teaching hospitals, but other internships that will throw you into an overnight by yourself, and you're going to have to figure out what she's describing on your own day one out of school. And that can be really difficult, and I think that also can push people away from ER, because that's a really difficult thing to handle, and it's scary, and that also can contribute to burnout. So just make sure that you're aware if you want to do an internship, that's a possibility, and if you want to avoid that, you should probably do some research on how to avoid that.
Yeah, I would say that goes about not just for internship, but mentorship programs in general. I've also heard stories about mentorship programs not really being mentorship programs, where it was like, well, there's another doctor in the building, and that's actually the extent of your mentorship, but you're still like kind of doing everything on your own from day one. So I agree, good idea to like really drill down, like what does this look like in this hospital, this position that I'm taking, whether that's an internship or a mentorship program outside of VEG or whatever. As far as inside VEG, there's a lot of stuff published about how we do it, and there are so many nerd graduates that would be happy to explain exactly what it looked like for them.
Yeah. I think I was very disheartened this summer when I was on ER, and they were overnight by themselves, which they had signed up for, and they understood that was going to happen. But then it was, there's an issue. I don't really feel comfortable contacting the clinician because I'm going to have to wake them up. And it's like, you can call us if you have an issue, but it's like they don't really want to pick up the phone, you know what I'm saying? They don't feel comfortable enough to call the clinician. And that's not every clinician. I'm not saying all the clinicians are bad, but I would feel bad calling and waking someone up in the middle of the night. So you also are going to have to battle that kind of issue as well. What do you enjoy most about helping new doctors find their footing and confidence in emergency medicine?
What I enjoy most, honestly, is seeing that light bulb click when something that they've only read about, or they were the third student on a case at school but weren't directly involved, when all of a sudden they've kind of figured it out on their own. To me, that's a great highlight. Or finishing their first GDV and PECSI on their own, where I don't even have to poke my head in, and they're just, you can just see above the mask, their eyes just smiling, they're so excited. That's the stuff that I really, really like. Like I said, it takes a while to get the speed, which is fine, but when they've mastered a technique, or they feel comfortable, when that second DKA comes in and they're like, all right, I know exactly how to approach this because I've already done one, and they, that confidence kicks in, that for me is the special sauce.
Awesome. Now, you've mentioned exotics, so let's talk more about that, because I know a lot of students are fascinated by exotics and non-traditional species work. You talked about how you got interested or introduced to working with exotic species. What are some of the most common exotic cases you see in emergency medicine?
I would say far and away rabbits, pet rabbits, are the most common species we probably see veg-wide. I have heard that there are some areas of the country that have veges where they see equal numbers of rabbits as cats, which kind of blows my mind. But rabbits are popular house pets, and rabbits are very sensitive. They have a GI system very similar to a horse. And as we all know, if you look at a horse sideways, they're going to colic. And the similar thing in rabbits is stasis. So we'll see rabbits who have a GI stasis for a reason. A lot of times we don't figure out what that reason is, since our job is, of course, the ER side of it. But GI disease in rabbits is very common. I think depending on the location of the veg, a lot of pet chickens, people have chickens in their backyard, who either sustain some sort of trauma or have some sort of illness. We'll see some pet birds, and bearded dragons are also very popular, and ferrets. So I would say those are probably the top 4 or 5 things that we see. And again, I know a lot of veterinarians are like, well, I don't know anything about exotics, so I shouldn't do it. To which I would say, I don't really know a lot about orthopedic fracture repair, but I see dogs with broken legs all the time. I stabilize them, I support them, I get them to a specialist. It's kind of the same thing with exotics at VEG. We're there to support them, pain meds, antibiotics if it's a wound or something, but essentially we're stabilizing them and then getting them to a specialist to do the finishing up care. So I would say that if you are an ER doctor, you can do it. It requires a little bit of learning how to handle species and different drug cocktails for sedation and pain management and anti-infectives, but it doesn't take long, because if you can do it with the mammalian species, you can do it with the other ones too.
Do you have a most memorable or challenging exotics case that you've seen?
Yep. Straight away, I know it's Tammy the turkey. So Tammy the turkey came to me when I was in Charlotte, and she was a great big girl. She was 13 kilograms.
Oh my gosh.
And I had sedated several small birds in the past for small laceration repairs and things like that, and so I felt pretty comfortable with it. But Tammy had been accidentally run over by her owner. With the truck. She apparently acted very much like the dogs on the property, and so the dogs would kind of chase the cars when they would come home, follow the cars. when the owners got home, and the turkey would do that too, which just sounds like the most adorable thing. And unfortunately, Tammy zigged and wound up getting run over. The owner was absolutely devastated, I think in no small part because he had done it, and it was, his kid's pet. So she was a big girl, and she had many, many lacerations, huge areas. And I treated it like I would treat a dog or cat that was in the same instance. And right after we extubated her, she coded and died. And it was heartbreaking because I felt like I had done everything right as far as I knew. And I was determined, and the owner was gracious. He was just happy that we had tried. But that wasn't enough for me. So I went to our exotics team and I presented them the whole case, and I was like, give me the feedback. Like, what can I do better? Basically presented it like an M&M rounds. Like, I don't want this to happen again. And they had a lot of valuable tips and tricks of things that I could have done better. Mostly in a bird that size, and then not having a diaphragm, you have to use positive pressure ventilation the entire time. We were using a warming blanket underneath her, but again, she was so big, we were not using like a bear hugger or something on top of her. So there were multiple reasons that they thought she may have decompensated so quickly right after surgery. All were valuable learning experiences for me. And I have now successfully done similar surgeries on many, many larger chickens and turkeys, and I always feel like Tammy is looking down at me, like grateful to have, unfortunately, given her life so that I could learn something. And, what I don't know is, also maybe she just had further internal injuries that we were unaware of. It may have had nothing to do with me, but at the same time, I learned a lot of things that I could improve upon. And so that I still have one of her feathers. I keep it on my locker, and it's just basically a reminder that we all can learn more. We can learn from our past experiences. Sometimes they're mistakes, but as we know better, we do better. And I feel like that was super important in my overall learning when it comes to the exotic species.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that we need to recognize as vet students that we're not always going to get it right. And so even though it's sad to hear these stories, I think it's important to hear them, and I appreciate your candor because a lot of times I think clinicians maybe don't share those things with us, and we feel like it's not okay to make a mistake or to learn or to, grow. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I think that it's important for us to remember that these things are going to happen. We're going to lose animals. Animals are going to die. And we're just going to have to do our best and learn from that.
Yeah. The great thing about that story, too, is the same nurse and assistant team that I had been on with Tammy was with me when we had a second turkey come into Charlotte named Tommy. And Tommy not only left awake and alive, but came back, not kidding, sounds like a joke, came back on Thanksgiving to have the staples and sutures removed, was doing amazing. And so it was so nice that as like a pod, as like a team, that we could share in that victory after our first one did not go according to plan.
Yeah. For vet students who are curious about exotics but intimidated by how different those patients can be, what advice would you give? You've already touched on it a little bit, but anything else you would say to people who might want to dabble in exotics?
So if you are an ER doctor and you want to dabble in exotics, at IVEX there's always an exotics track. So that's one way to go. Joining like the American Association of Avian Practitioners, those sorts of things, just kind of being involved. There's tons of books on exotic medicine, whether that's avian or reptile or small mammals or all of them. So there are ways that you can educate yourself. But I would say CE is the first way to go. There are some all exotic CE. Exotics Con is unfortunately no longer a thing, but hopefully it will come back at some point. But I do know at IVEX and the larger conferences, there is almost always an exotics track.
Awesome. You've given us some great advice today about exotics, emergency medicine, being a medical director. I want to hear from you about some advice that you would give. So looking back, what's one thing you wish you could tell your younger self when you were just starting out?
That's a really good question. So my favorite quote, it's unaccredited, I don't know who said this, was we never lose, we win or we learn. And that is very much how I like to structure my own self, so that I don't see failures as failures. I see them as an opportunity to learn something. And I feel like I use that also in my mentoring. But that is my biggest piece of advice, is to go out there and experience and do things, because even if you don't win, you will learn.
And finally, what's one piece of advice you'd give to veterinary students or new grads listening who might be figuring out where they fit in this profession?
I think shadowing or externships, anything like that where it's low stakes. It's mostly watching. Some externships you can be as hands-on as you want. But for instance, for me, when I was going back into small animal, it's what I started with was shadowing. Like, is this what I want to do? And decided that it was very much just as interesting. I just didn't have a whole lot of small animal experience before jumping in that way, because even prior to vet school, I had all equine experience in that manner. So if you think there's something you'd want to try, I would find someone with a good reputation and see if you can hang out and learn on the fly.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Hahn, thank you so much for sharing your story and all your insights from GP to ER to exotics to mentorship. There's so much wisdom here for anyone dreaming of a fulfilling career in vet med. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Grace.
And with that, my name is Grace Gaynor, and I just interviewed Dr. Robyn Hahn, and we are Scrubbing Out.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Scrubbed In, the DVM Journey. Thanks for tuning in and being a part of our community of future vets and animal lovers. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. It helps others find the show and join the conversation. And if you have any questions or topics you'd love to hear about, feel free to leave us a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep scrubbing in, and remember, the journey to becoming a DVM is one step at a time.